Okay, welcome back to another episode in the video series called Please Fix Things. I'm looking at a breakdown of a trade that was a failure from a day trader, or perhaps it's an institution, or it could be short term, could be long term. It just needs to be like a spectacular failure. So I'm surprised it took this long for this to happen to me, but I actually had a pretty bad losing trade this week. Bad in analysis, bad in execution. So this is a great space to break this down and to try to please fix it. So basically what I was trying to do is on Thursday of this week, which was July 23rd, 2026, I was trying to go long Bitcoin into the draw on liquidity, the buy side draw on liquidity. But when we get to the trade, I'll show you basically why I fell victim to the three things that Romeo asks us all to watch out for. And yeah, so I'll be relating my failure to these broad universal concepts of why CRTs tend to fail from his video called why CRTs fail. So let's get to the trade setup. This is actually the start of the week. Well, it's actually the end of the previous week, so I'll be going a little bit quickly here. Basically, as you can see, let's do a little higher time frame context. This is a 2-day chart. Actually, I think it might look good on the weekly chart, or maybe even the 2-week chart. 2 weeks. Yeah, so it's a little. So what we're doing is we're basically playing. We're playing around, we're accumulating at the bottom of this this extreme bearish trend in Bitcoin, and it's very fractal because this setup, we've, from a macro perspective, we've had a really intense bear trend into accumulation, which we're currently in, and then within that accumulation, there's a pretty intense bear trend with further accumulation. The reason why my lower time frame bias was long is where we are in the quarter. So right now, Q3 just started of 2026, and so what you'd expect accumulation as the quarter starts into some sort of manipulation, and then finally distribution for like the so-called quarterly swing. In other words, if Q3 is set to be a trending quarter, which I think it might be, I think we might just see further continuation in crypto lower, then you're going to be looking out for manipulation into the internal buy side liquidity. So in other words, you'd be looking to be bullish early on in the development of the quarter. So here's the quarterly chart, and so you can see how Q2 of 2026 finished. It was a close below, which is bearish, right, of the previous low. But then when Q3 opens, you're expecting some retracement. We've already hit the 50% of the body, the candle body there. We haven't really hit like that quarterly close or the open of Q2 yet, nor have we hit the 50% of the quarter. Though I think on the monthly chart, yeah, so the monthly chart, we've dug into this, after this month closes, which, at this point, I'm pretty sure it'll be closing fairly lower. We'll have a nice fair value gap, a bearish fair value gap forming on the monthly. have we hit 50% of this month? I haven't actually checked yet. Let me get the full range. Man, so we've barely, if we have hit it, we've barely hit it. No, we haven't hit it yet. So yeah, so it's kind of interesting. Like there's you know, some heuristics you can use obviously to figure out. But for me, I love to see a previous high taken out as a form of guaranteed manipulation. And what we've ended up with is a pause CRT on a kind of a 2-week time frame. It looks a little bit better when you consider it as a range and you go back to, like, let's say like a daily time frame. Here, I'll put this back onto visibility there. So let me just check to see if I'm on the right. Yeah, good, I'm on the right screen. So this range here, where it's essentially like a bearish extension, and we do trade down into the cycle, you know, the quote-unquote all-time lows for the current bearish cycle we're in, and so we trade down to that on the first day of the or kind of on the last trading day of the previous quarter, first trading day of the new quarter. So it's kind of a tell that, you know, this is one of these bullish pause entries, to basically say, like, you know, we're going to do some sort of candle range trade of this range, and it's expected to be paused because we're expecting accumulation. And boy, we have had lots of accumulation with this ascending channel. So I'm gonna keep moving forward here in price, and I also want to point out that there is a lot of sell side liquidity building up. We're doing like a perfect job accumulating the orders. If you go on to, you can, like, obviously for Romeo and for CRT traders, he likes to say you don't really need extra tools. The candlesticks tell you everything you need to know. But just to verify, you can go and look at a liquidity heat map for Bitcoin, and there's a lot of sell side liquidity on the lower time frame, both at that 61,000 level and at the, you know, 57,800 level, or whatever it is just below that low, 57,600 level. Okay, so this stab right here is a sniper entry because it clears, it barely clears that high there. And again, I mean, we're on the, it's a little bit imprecise with the wicks just because we're on the Globex contract. We're not on the, yeah, so it doesn't even clear that high. So it's not even technically a sniper entry. In other words, it's not wicking in between these two successive wicks there. So at the time, I can remember thinking that, you know, and here we are, it's Thursday, so this is the day, well, Thursday would be the next, so this is essentially my bullish entry that I was trying to force into the market to trade, to kiss of death up into these highs. And you can check back on this video series, but there's a TJR video where he's trading the NASDAQ. He's in a really similar situation where you have a pause CRT that you're waiting to play out and get to exactly fruition. In other words, you want your pause CRT to completely clear out and take out the range high and go to 100% completion. And the disappointing thing is sometimes they just don't, for reasons, right? And so let's get to my entry, and then we'll do the forensic, you know, the accident breakdown analysis, and we'll look to see exactly how this car got off the road and smashed into a telephone pole. Okay. So we're still on the daily chart. I'm looking for, what time is it? Yeah, so it's Asia right now. I want to say that so you guys know what type of model I always look for. I always look for price to take out some sort of origination candle low and then rocket higher. So in other words, if that up close leg, that thrust up gets a pause CRT on the bearish side, which it really did look like it was, my trade entry is to look for a turtle soup of one of these old lows here, and then have price distribute very quickly to the upside. In other words, like about, if it takes 10 candles for price to do the pause CRT on the bearish side here, I'm looking for 3 candles of distribution to the upside. Okay, so I think that might have been the candle that induced me to get long, because I'm looking at that. I'm looking on the hourly chart right now, and this is that's a bottomless hourly candle, and right now we're in early London. I'm trying to think, was I up in the morning to get that long there? I don't think I was. I think I might have. Yeah, I think I might have even had patience to get that full range there. And I mean, look at the entrainment. I mean, every single time you took this particular trade on the way up, you were successful. And I did. I mean, I think I had a good trade on Wednesday. It's funny because I was trading it to the downside. Yeah, so I may have even caught this one on Wednesday. I have to go back and look at my journal. I think I did. Like a pretty high conviction. And then obviously we break down and we close below that swing low, and that should have been kind of a tell. But at the same time, I mean, the market's been trained at this point, like almost Pavlovian, with a Pavlovian conditioning, just to be like, we're in a wide range bar. We traded above the wide range channel there, and now we're dipping back, and we might hit like the 50% line and then trade higher. But yeah, so now that I'm looking at this was exactly my entry that blew me up. Which this actually does follow my system really well, other than being so premium. It's so premium. I mean, we are in serious kiss of death territory, and I could look back on my slides from the TGR Nasdaq long analysis, and it was like this exact setup where you have this accumulation at the very top end, and then a slight manipulation, like giving you that kiss of death setup. But here's the problem with that is that I think that it was, if you look at the timing, I mean, we're 21 days into the quarter, and so if I could add to these reasons, which I'll break down these reasons in a second, and just in a personal, that's that last one, that incorrect market context actually covers that. So yeah, so it's the context of when I decided to go long. When, in other words, the time of it was wrong too. So I was both wrong in time and somewhat in price. Though this could, this same setup may have worked in the past. But in the context of what it is, it's a pause CRT. The market's already shown a lot of hesitation. It's not, a pause CRT should be treated completely differently than a 3 candle, a 3 distribution candle CRT, where you have, that 2023 model where you have a really intense, we'll do it on the bearish side, just like this one, really intense downward move, and then you have a very, very extended period of time. I'm just doing the 2023 model, so if you guys know, a really extended time for price to actually eventually take out this this high, a pause model, in other words, and then you have your turtle soup of that level. Well, you'd expect if you were to draw a time range, or the date range, you'd expect if that were 900 bars, we'll call it, right? Then it's 0.3 of 900, right? Which is like 250 or 267, right? And so it's a real fast retracement at that point. And that at this point you can trade Kiss of Deaths reliably. You can trade that Kiss of Death with this overall market context very reliably. But the problem is we're not in one of those. We're in a pause bullish CRT, and I've been winning so much with this system that I got over my skis, and I failed to see the bearish turtle soup that happened, and we hit all three of these. So number one, SMT, you have to go to Ethereum. That's a classic correlated asset to compare Bitcoin to. And so if we compare Ethereum, I will show you the SMT here. I think this is the right window. Yeah, this is the right window. Good. So where does this higher time frame PD array, or this higher time frame key level, come from? Ethereum really needed to trade up into that particular breaker, it seems, and just the wick, just the wick of the breaker was sufficient. And you could argue that it's also traded into the body of these candles as well, in trading into that wick. And here we have like a classic turtle soup of that previous high. This high has already been taken out. Now, this is the high. Was it this high? Let's go back to, I'm just going to sneak a peek. Yeah, so it's the mid-June high. The mid-June high. So Bitcoin has yet to take out its mid-June high. Whereas with Ethereum, we've already set up this topping pattern, which, how did we know it was a topping pattern? How did we know, well, my trade has failed. We've had a pretty good, we've had an extended period of time to trade above that level, and we closed below that key level there, and so that could be like a tell. We haven't actually finished the week yet. Bitcoin, the weekly changeover, I think, is like Sunday night at 1800 EST, but I actually think that we're gonna finish our weekly candle with ETH closing below that level. It's always hard to predict weekend trade. I mean, there's no volume, but yeah, I mean, if we do actually close below that weekly, on a weekly basis, if we close below that swing low, that swing high, then that is looking very bearish. That's looking like a definite. And it's interesting how they never let ETH fill this fair value gap completely. That's always an interesting thing too. So like, ETH hasn't filled the very first weekly bearish fair value gap. Bitcoin hasn't cleared that swing high, which I really thought it was going to. That might feel inefficient, but let me tell you, they leave inefficiency on purpose. They leave inefficiency on purpose because this is the inefficiency that is then later targeted after we set our bottom. And with the overall global liquidity cycle set to bottom sometime in Q1 of 2027, Q3 and Q4 for Bitcoin and Ethereum and the crypto space, that becomes the proving ground where it's actually not uncharacteristic for the crypto to actually set the low before the global liquidity has completely receded. It just works like that. I mean, people front run the accumulation. Sorry, the people front run the tide of liquidity coming back in with crypto. Crypto is like the tip of the arrow type asset to do that in. Perfect asset to trade a bottoming in global liquidity. But you have to be mindful of that 65 to 68 month cycle. So in other words, the last time we had this opportunity was back in 2022, October of 2022, back here. So October of 2022 was here, and Bitcoin was bottoming shortly thereafter. Romeo called that one, by the way, too. So, in other words, we're going to be bearish for the next 2 months, the next 3 months after that, maybe a month into 2027. We're going to be very bearish, and we're going to be inefficiently bearish. In other words, we're going to be okay with leaving an SMT unfilled, right? Leaving fair value gaps, like with ETH on the weekly chart there. Where is it? Unfilled, right? We're going to be okay with that being unfilled until we hit all of our draws. And another thing with ETH is Romeo's called this out on his X feed, 700 in ETH. So in other words, where are we going to be at in December of 2026? December of 2026 this year, January 27, February 27. It's, you know, the timing is a little harder to project. I actually made a video about this ETH. It's in there's a new video series I have called Romeo Makes Trading Predictions, RMTP, on this channel, talking about the 700 in ETH target and breaking that down and why that's actually it actually fits the model of a pause CRT into a rapid distribution. So yeah, let's just do a post-mortem on the trade really quick. I get long there in NYAM, and then price just dumps into my stop loss. Yeah, so then that's Friday. You know, we did hit this later on. So in other words, the next trading day in the futures, like if you were to get long Asia and hit that, that would have been a successful trade. But you wouldn't be targeting. This isn't one of those classic distribution type things because you didn't even get to 50%. So in other words, if it's this range is the range, we never even got to 50% before price dumped. So yeah, so clearly like we shouldn't be looking for longs there, and we should even be looking for shorts. Technically we should have been short there, right, if that was the bearish, but it's a little harder to see when you have when you have a real subtle SMT style, you know, a so-called failure of this pause CRT. But so-called failures are signals for those who are really watching. But yeah, so I think I'm gonna expect I've changed Friday's trade has kind of changed my analysis a little bit. I think we're more risk off right now than I kind of understood at the time, and so I'm now shifting my view, and I'll show you my new view of where I'm thinking Bitcoin particularly should go. So in other words, we're treating this as the origination candle, And so let's go to the correct time frame to break this down. It's going to make me really sad, but I'm going to have to buy TradingView Premium just to get the exotic time frames, because my strategy is essentially relying on exotic time frames. Like I need the 2-day, I need the 4-day, I need to be able to type in a time frame and just go right to the chart. It's not quite a week, right? Because there isn't enough candles. If that's the origination candle there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's only been 6 candles. See, that's the other thing is I've been going long on this pause CRT in advance of this setup, and here I am thinking that it's going to be a perfect weekly setup, but it's not, and that's fine. There's a lot of let's make it work. So if we have would it work with a 6-day setup, or a let's try a 5-day setup, and of course, oops, that's minutes. 5 days. Let's fix this. Fix our perspective here. Fix our bias. Yeah, I didn't really get a. I mean, it wasn't. I've been winning. I've been winning a lot. I've been getting payouts, passing evaluations. I'm still in the growth mode as far as the prop firm trading goes. So it hurt me, but it didn't hurt me that bad. And so the most important thing is to correct the bias. So let's go to a 5-day. Yeah, 5-day looks really promising. So if this is the origination candle and all we want to do is trade into the order block, the order block being this the wick of that 5-day candle, and keeping in mind that we do have an SMT with ETH. So in other words, that's our high, that's our turtle soup. If that's the origination candle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and this candle is actually closing right now, today, because it started on the 20th. And so from the 25th onwards is distribution, and that's over the next 15 calendar days, which every calendar day is a trading day for crypto. And so my base case now is, because we have so in other words, we're gonna be taking out the lows, look to take out the lows within 2 or 3 candles. So certainly by August 9th, we will have taken out the lows. So in other words, obviously we can wick up into this descending trend line, but it really will be linear or faster than linear, an upside down parabola, as we trade down into this sell side liquidity with a fierce vengeance. And so as far as previous lows on the opposing range to target, that's a minor one, but this is this right here is a major low, 50,000, below 50,000 even. So those two areas we can look to target for continuation. So in other words, the move that over the next 15 days that is predicted to take out that low, it could be in 10 days the low gets taken out, and then in the additional 5 days, the momentum carries us lower to there. Um, we're in the overall bearish context. I really was expecting a lot more bullish, a lot more bullish manipulation before this move. So I could be wrong, but yeah. Let me see. I've been on Brave this entire time, haven't I? I switched back to my FX replay. That's okay. Here, I'll show you guys really quick. So yeah, so if this is our 5-day model in Bitcoin, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it's by, I'll draw the box. So if we have 1, 2, 3 candles of so yeah, so I'm expecting that box is the target for the initial target lower, and then because we're in a bearish context, I'm expecting further continuation, like a further breakdown within August. So in other words, August, starting with the last week of July, which is next trading week. We'll go to the weekly chart now. Yeah, so next week is a crossover week, and then the following week is going to be like the first actual Monday that begins in August, and it's going to be an NFP week. And then you've got the mid-August with like a mid-August CPI release. But I'm expecting every week after this to be bearish, because this is the little sad accumulation and manipulation that we've managed to eke out in Bitcoin. Not a lot of people are watching the crypto space right now. Crypto, there's these massive sector rotations happening with like, AI, the AI stocks, and then like it's like the pitchforks, sell the miners the pitchforks, so it's like the semiconductors, but then it's like, okay, well, it's all needing energy, and so it's switching into energy, and there's people even talking about natural gas, obviously crude going to all-time highs because of Iran. So you have all sorts of rotations happening, and crypto is like the forgotten, it's just been left. It's been left at soccer practice, and nobody remembered to pick it up at this point. So it doesn't surprise me that we're not seeing a lot of energy in terms of an accumulation into manipulation into eternal buy-side liquidity, as we would expect. But then again, looking at the quarterly candles one more time. Looking at the quarterly candles, there's, we're just in a sequence of down close candles. And this is how it looks. I mean, we are distributing off of a, we could be just distributing off of a pause CRT in some respect, or it could be kind of keeping a symmetry, and that really would. So if we trade next quarter, if we trade down into this low, that will be fairly symmetric, right? In other words, almost like let's see the 6-month chart. Yeah. So in other words, a little slower than symmetrical, but yeah, still keeping to some pretty good symmetry there. And I can see now, looking at these 6-month candles, why this might be that 46,000 level, and that's kind of like the key level. So obviously we could trade lower as we explore, as we kind of like turtle soup, set up bottoming formations. If you're making a bottom on the 6-month chart, I mean, that takes a long time. That takes multiple weeks to form, a quarter even. to form. So yeah, that's our outlook for Bitcoin. We didn't even get to the 50%. I'm so surprised that we didn't even get to the 50. Oh no, we did. I must have been looking at the wrong month. We of course we traded into the 50%. So there we go. So I was rude to expect higher than that. Yeah, so now we're in the premium of this particular monthly range. So there you go. Anything is fair game. Anything is fair game, even a SMT turtle soup with ETH, with Bitcoin being the more bearish of the two. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening to my ramble